Hello Internet, and welcome to Ghosts on Holiday's YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about a game that doesn't exist.
Help me!
People Still Live Here is a new series created by Kane, creator of the popular Backroom series as well as The Oldest View, both of which I've covered on this channel before. But those series are not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about People Still Live Here, which is the series itself, but also the game within the series, which tells the story of events that happened within the universe a long time ago, but we're going to get into the intricacies of that later. It was also a musical album like a whole year before there was any video, and I totally forgot to mention that at any other point in this video. It really slaps, and it does seem to have some tangential theming in relation to the video series back to the regular video. Something I like about Kane Pixel's work is that each of the 3 original series he's done so far have consistent theming, so to speak, within themselves, but also relating to each other, while still covering their own stories and internal messages. The theming, to me, for most of these series is memory, the past, nostalgia, and anemoia. Nostalgia is a longing or fond remembrance of the past, and anemoia is nostalgia for something you personally haven't experienced. I've talked about Kane and his relationship with nostalgia and anemoia before, a little bit in my Oldest View video, and maybe in my Backrooms video, I don't really remember, but I'll link both of those below, because, you should watch them, but that's not why we're here today. People Still Live Here feels nostalgic. Most of us probably wouldn't immediately get that from the first video or episode, whatever you want to call it, but it's there, and I'm going to tell you why later, because now we have to talk about the first video, Saywell. Saywell features a man dying while staring up at some sort of horrifying animatronic old man with some folky flair. Then ends with a video of the sun as Morse code plays in the background. Like with The Oldest View, this first video feels like it's meant to hook us in. There's a mystery here, because we don't really know what's going on. What is this thing, and who is this guy, and what was that Morse code? Well, we do have some answers already thanks to the comments on the video. As a handful of people pointed out, the strange animatronic head that we see is called a laughing head. It's a sort of wall-hanging toy that would yodel, stick out its tongue, and some of them would even spray water on you, which, if I spit on someone, it's a crime, but if this robot does it, it's fine. I don't know what's up with these double standards. The distorted yodeling that we hear in the background of Saywell is actually from a laughing head. I'm going to assume that it being portrayed in this disturbing way was done purposefully, and we have some evidence to show that that may be the case much later in the series. The man who is dying is Clifton J. Saywell, whom the video is titled for. Again, more information on him later, but yes, this is him dying. Dying in probably one of the worst and most strange ways you can die, with a creepy animatronic standing over you Five Nights at Freddy's style. And now we have to talk about the Morse code, which, again, based on comments from both the YouTube video and Reddit, reads, "And now my body has become one with a faraway land. I am the meadow and the sky all around. You work the land, and so you work for the land, and, in return, the land accepts you. You may think your work is finite and conclusive when the time comes to depart. But the land will always remember what you gave to it, and, in time, you and your work will live on through the land." This is very poetic, and what it means for the greater series is hard to say this early on, but from a pure writing standpoint, it's very beautiful and a nice way to look at death. That the world you live in would remember you for the things that you've done, even after you're gone. But I'm sure story-wise, it means something greater. So, a man dies while a terrifying yodeling animatronic looks over him, or he dies under where it's hanging on a wall, and then we get a message from, who knows, the beyond, from Saywell, from something else. There's a lot of mystery in this first video, and only a few questions are going to get answered in the second one, which is titled, People Still Live Here, version 8.3 2005 gameplay. Similar to The Oldest View, Episode 2 is when the real meat and potatoes of the series begins to show itself. This episode is more than 10 times longer than the first, and seems to be more or less how the story is going to be navigated in addition to the shorter cinematic CGI sequences and the live action sequences. This episode plays out like an uncommentated let's play of a game based on the life of Clifton J. Saywell, the man that we saw die in the previous episode. The game is called People Still Live Here, and it basically confirms to us that Clifton J. Saywell is dead, with a dedication to him at the beginning. We can confirm he's dead not only because of the dedication, but there is an obituary for him in the description. No, he is not a real person, I checked, but some of the locations in the series are real, including the swamp that is mentioned in his obituary, Hockomock Swamp, which is going to become relevant very soon. The game is made by Marathon 8 Software Inc. and is based on the events experienced by Clifton J. Saywell between 1934 and 1946, so a pretty long time ago compared to the modern age. The game is made in honor of him because, as we've already established, he is no longer alive. He died in 1994 on February 12th, which is interesting to note because that is 4 days after his 80th birthday, as he was born on February 8th, 1914. Just a neat little fact that may or may not be important, we don't know yet. I just want to say that something I really like about this series is how well Kane Pixels emulated the feeling of these old nostalgic games, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. The main menu of People Still Live Here features a far cheerier version of the yodeled tune from the first episode. And shows a field which we will become acquainted with very soon. Also, there's this creepy eye here, which, is basically watching us. After going through the main menu, the game starts, so to speak. And you should start liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video. Haha, yeah! After a loading screen, we begin to hear the sound of crickets, as an incredibly cryptic and creepy prologue message of sorts is displayed. The text on the screen relay the thoughts of Saywell in second person before the events of the game, and reads, "You lie awake, unable to take your mind off of what you discovered out in the swamp. Tomorrow you will return to that place. Do you remember the overgrown man from when you were a child? He said you must go to the meadow alone. You always wondered what he'd meant by that." The text ends and is followed by a bell chime and a white light. The main character of the game spawns in a swamp looking up towards the sky, eventually following the obvious path forward into what looks to be a wooden temple. An ambient organ song begins to play, giving the building an even more religious and eerie feeling as the player looks around. In the very center of the room is a stairway downward, which leads to a door. I want to take note of the swirl above the stairs. The player stops and looks up at it, and I didn't think this was very important at first, but it's obviously there for a reason. This is a spiral, which can be symbolic of a lot of different things, and has been used in many different cultures, spanning the entirety of human history. There's also a security camera right up there, which is interesting too. The player goes down the stairs to the small hallway-like room with the door. It almost looks like an office, and then proceeds through the door, which itself leads into a longer, metallic, and futuristic-looking hallway with an ominous and repetitive machine-like whir playing in loop in the background. Now, I'd like to remind you that this is all meant to be something that happened to Clifton J. Saywell in real life, which makes this all the more interesting and surreal. While we are seeing it recreated in a video game, this, from the world of the story at least, happened to a man in his living, breathing life. He found a strange temple in a swamp, and walked along a strange metallic tunnel to a knocker door into, well, this is where things get a little bit more confusing and also interesting. This is when the story gets gamified quite literally. Once the player passes through the strange door, they find themselves in an expansive Windows XP desktop background type area. The words Day 1 and a little level intro tune play, and the player is instructed to find 3 different objects throughout the level. These objects are a wampum, a Native American object that was used as a sort of living record, though it had other uses as well. An analog watch, which should be self-explanatory, but for all of you youngsters out there, this is how we used to tell time. And a compressor, which is a thing that changes pressure. Whether these have anything to do with each other, I have no idea. Though again, they seem like they'd be symbolic, don't they? Especially the wampum, a lot of stuff about telling time and history and all of that. Anyway, the player is instructed to collect them before sunset and is then loaded into the field from the beginning. And then the player begins to explore. There are many strange things abound, but it is a video game representation of real-life events, so it's hard to tell what is the difference between what was real and what was the developers just having some creative freedom with the stories they were told. There's some strange pipes, which almost look like communication devices behind the windmill, like a classic talk into the tube and it comes out the other end. There's a little house in the distance. The player explores a little more, and there's a tree-filled area, and they find the blanket with the watch floating on it, which is nice. It's next to a single tree. It looks a little off, a little creepy. When the watch is picked up, a nice little tone plays, which is nice, but also ominous and creepy, like everything else so far. A lot of this is just about vibes. It's meant to feel like a sort of commentary-less Let's Play that you might have just happened upon while watching YouTube videos or something like that. The ambiance, visuals, and atmosphere all combine to give you this nostalgic feeling, again, for something that you might not have actually played. This feels like an approximation of a bunch of different types of games from back in the day, from anywhere from 1995 to 2005. For someone like me, who is a lot older than most of Kane Pixel's audience, and even Kane Pixel himself, being that I am 30 and that I believe Kane Pixel is 20, this fake game reminds me a lot of different old point-and-click adventure games like Myst, but with a bit of a modern twist to it. It's more free-form. The character is able to walk around as if they're using an analog stick or WASD. I can't remember many games that play exactly like this and also look and sound like this, which is why there is an infusion of modernity as well. The gameplay was apparently recorded in 2005, which makes sense, but he did a really good job of capturing that feeling of this is kind of familiar for something that is, for all intents and purposes, completely new to our world. As the player explores, there is a looping, whooping wind sound effect in the background, as well as the bit-crushed sound of the character's footsteps as they explore through the world. This sound design gives the world a sort of openness and emptiness that is simultaneously freeing and unsettling. This continues when they enter the house that they saw in the distance, and while inside they can hear that whooping wind outside hitting the house, and it sounds very like ominous and big. Inside of this house they find a sheet of paper with a solution to a puzzle they have yet to find. Then, after leaving the house, they find the wampum placed unceremoniously on a fountain bench not far from the house, and then also find that same puzzle that was referenced in the house on that sheet of paper, which they used to spot another location in the distance, but not before being jump-scared by what seems to be a living train sign. I call this moment to scare because this did make me jump the first time I was watching this video. The rest of the video is so quiet and monotone with the same whooping wind sound effects and footstep sound effects that when this comes out of nowhere, it does genuinely surprise you. The only lead up to it was you can kind of hear the sound that it's making in the background a couple of times before it actually flies by. But yeah, we have no idea what that is, and so we're just going to move on. What the player character finds is what looks to be a generic office building, though it is fenced in. The only way in is a terrifying and ominous tunnel that looks scarier than anything else in this episode so far, besides maybe the living train sign. Now, there is something off about this office building as well. I don't know if I need to tell you what it is, but again, this game is supposed to take place in a memory that happened in the 1930s or 1940s, and this office building looks more like one that we would find today than back then. The main character enters the office building. Behind the desk is an interesting symbol, which doesn't seem to have any relevance yet because I looked into it and it doesn't seem to mean anything outside of it existing in this game. The character tries to enter a door and the game freezes, Then eventually it cuts back to gameplay where they do enter what seems to be a large server room, or something along those lines, where they meet an average-looking guy. Now again, this game is supposed to be taking place in a memory that happened like 100 years ago, and there's servers in this room, but we're going to move on from that and focus on what happens in this room. Apparently the man he sees was locked in this room, and interestingly he asks,
"The shepherd's not mad, is he? I was just trying to look at the computers to see where my favorite people were moved to."
Which, okay, what does that mean? Are they in the computer that they're also seeing in this computer room? And also, this guy sounds incredibly sad. He continues by saying,
"It's been a long time since I've read computer words, though, so I can't figure out how to get their location out of the machine."
So, is it that wherever Saywell went into is a computer itself? A computer which can be accessed within itself? Hard to say. One small detail to notice that is only on the screen for a second is the open canned food cans that are in the corner over there, meaning that the guy saying he was in here for a while is true and that he was even forced to eat and possibly sleep in here. We also might see how he got in, which is that vent right there, but who knows, this is all a mystery still. I'd also like to make quick note of his outfit, which is a modern outfit. He's literally wearing sneakers, blue jeans, and a modern polo shirt. This guy is not from the 1930s or 1940s. Anyway, he finds the compressor and goes to leave. Outside, the guy is waiting for him. His lines repeat like a classic video game NPCs would.
"Hey you! Over here! Hey you! Over here!"
Again, his lines are incredibly ominous and seem to imply that they, meaning Saywell and the man himself, are in a computer of some kind, or a simulated world, at least. He says,
"Hey, you're not going to tell anyone I was here, are you? I mean, you're technically allowed to, but I would really appreciate it if you didn't. I don't want people to think I'm spying on their thoughts. I wouldn't do that."
Before, oh god!
It is important to respect.
The sign thing grabs him and he lets out a pretty genuinely terrifying and terrified scream. This disturbing moment causes the player to rush back to the little mini castle that they entered the level from as the world falls into darkness. And as they're rushing there, we can begin to hear one of those signs closing in on them in the background. But they do escape, and they get this cool little level finished sign, and it's all hunky-dory, and they got a high score, and blah blah blah. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. These first two episodes alone give us a lot of symbology and meaning, specifically pointing at death. There's the Morse code and what it meant, the swirl, and the fact that the character whose perspective we are following is dead, and we're playing a game about strange events that happened to him when he was alive and young. Remember, he died at the age of 80. What that has to do with what we are seeing in the game is hard to say at this point. It is possible that Clifton J. Saywell went to this place he's seeing physically, but this place also seems to be, at least from some of the hints in the game, a sort of living computer world that he also got to through some sort of swamp temple portal hallway. Of course, there's the game itself, which is a digital world, but if we're saying that these events actually happened to him and the game are just a representation of that, then it did happen, at least in some way, as the game is saying. That is, if everything in the game is literal, at least the core story parts of it. We know there is some being or person called the Shepherd who seems to be the boss around these parts.
The shepherd's not mad, is he?
That people are being stored in computers, possibly that they can access themselves, or it's also possible that rather than the guy we saw being in a computer, other people are. Possibly their consciousnesses? Again, it's all too vague to really put a nail in the coffin right now. Haha, get it? It's interesting to speculate on what is part of the game and what is actually part of the story. Like, what is the creative direction of the developers? Or is Kane Pixels making it all literal, like everything we're seeing in the game is what happened? Like, was Saywell looking for those items? Probably not. I imagine it's just a thing to drive the player to explore the world and encounter the different areas in it. No matter what, it is really trippy and surreal when you think about the game itself and the fact that apparently someone experienced whatever we're seeing in real life, or at least an approximation of it. Like, this is a real place somewhere. We get to experience a little of that idea in the next video, which looks as if it takes place in that world from a more realistic perspective. This video is titled Graveyard. This video is incredibly short, under a minute in fact. A person is looking around a gigantic, pretty field similar to that of the game, this one filled with spinning wind turbines. Birds can be heard. The camera turns to a bunch of, well, train crossing signs.
It is important to respect.
Which, considering what we saw in the previous episode, we know is not a good thing. Probably. The person holding the camera approaches one, and it begins to ding discordantly, causing the person to panic and run. We can easily surmise that the graveyard is for these sign creatures, whatever they are, as they are, in fact, buried in the ground here. We can also surmise that the person filming is aware of the danger they pose because the sound and activation of the sign causes them to immediately freak out and run. The wind turbines in the background are also of note because that is modern technology, and obviously if this is being filmed on a camera, that is also modern technology, but we can't really surmise when this is taking place because the game itself is also supposed to take place in the past, but I imagine at least the person within this footage in Graveyard is from the present since he has a camera. Similar to something we're going to see as the series goes on, it's also interesting to take note of how this landscape changes. Either the fields themselves are very big or they take different shapes, mattering on when you come or who you are. We don't really know yet, because those turbines obviously weren't in the game, but we're going to see it change again in just a little bit in the next episode. But, speaking of modern technology, I'm going to sound like a broken record here in reminding everyone that this game is supposed to take place in memories that Clifton J. Saywell had from the 1930s and 40s, which means he saw this place in person, including the strange metallic tunnel, the office building, and the computer room when he was in his 20s and 30s 100 years ago. He apparently worked as a human computer after World War II if we go back and look at his obituary, which makes this all the more interesting. You know, because of all the computer stuff, the fact that this is taking place in a game, the fact that there's servers that apparently house people, etc., etc. If we look at real-life history, this game, and thus the memories that Saywell recounted for the game to be made, span the entirety of World War II, which took place between 1939 and 1945. This means that the game and the events that they are depicting was happening before, during, and after World War II. I just say this because obviously if he traveled to this strange place, it would mean more modern technology was in this place outside of its time in our world. Not to mention that Saywell encountered the overgrown man when he was a child, which would have been even earlier in his life. Anyway, it's time to go back to watching Let's Plays. People Still Live Here 2005 Day 2 gameplay. The second day starts with the player already at the door at the end of the metal hallway. He enters it, and as before, the day starts with a Day 2 intro, and that really pretty and surprisingly animoic tune. It's really neat that Kane was able to make sounds like this that do sound like they'd be out of a game from the late 90s or early 2000s. This does feel like something I would have rented from Blockbuster on my PS2 back in the day. The items for the second day are a bit confusing to say the least, but they sort of continue the theme from the first if you do a little reaching. A feather could be related to a wampum in that they both were used by Native American cultures. A sundial is just a different form of a watch, older than a watch even itself, and I'm sure a few people won't even know what a sundial is. And a bowling ball is heavy, and a compressor might be heavy too. Like I said, it's a big reach. Upon exiting the starter area, the player can see that the map has changed. Rather than a house in the back direction, there are these strange blue towers. And in the opposite direction, back where the watch was on the first day, there's now an air balloon. The player heads towards the air balloon, noticing that the watch location from the previous day has also changed, though the rocks remain. It looks a little bit messier. On the way to the balloon, they approach a well, with signs that say, "For visual use only." Next to the well and the signs are an unattended pair of shoes. Of course, I don't need to spell out the implication, is that it seems that someone took off their shoes and jumped into the well, but of course, who would do that? It's for visual use only, as the signs say. You would be breaking the rules. Don't want the shepherd to find out, do you? Who knows why the shoes are there really, but that's what I thought. After this strange find of the well and the shoes, the player finally gets to the air balloon. Underneath it is a very strange looking man with a bunch of balloons. His face is long and kind of spooky. It's interesting since the guy from the previous day looked so normal. This guy's outfit is kinda rad though. While the balloon man isn't willing to give away any of his balloons, he says that if the player will get a painting from Ann the Painter, he'll bring down his fire balloon, which I'm guessing is the air balloon, and let him have whatever's inside. My guess is what's in the air balloon is probably one of the objects he needs to complete the level. My guess is the bowling ball.
Bad news, buddy. These are my last balloons. I'm gonna have to keep them to myself.
This may or may not be important, but he says Ann won't give him a painting because of the color of his balloons. Ann is apparently balloon racist.
I'm her biggest fan, but she won't let me have any of her paintings because she's mad about the color of my balloons.
This guy looks weird, so I do wonder if he's an invention of the developers of the game or someone Clifton Saywell actually ran into. It would make sense to have things change for the game, but it also muddies the water of what the game is retelling. Of course, my only reason thinking this is the guy looks really strange compared to the other humans he runs into during the game. Except the next guy he runs into, which is also equally as weird looking and creepy, so yeah. If the balloon man looked like this for real in Clifton Saywell's journey to wherever this place is, then he's pretty creepy looking, but nice enough, so maybe, we're fine. After conversing with the balloon man, the player walks towards what ends up being a barn in the distance. Outside of it are what seem to be solar panels, or possibly mirrors. They look almost exactly like the towers that we saw in the distance earlier, so I'm going to assume they're the same structures for now, but we don't know completely. One side of the barn is closed off, which is typical of a game, so the player goes around and enters the other side, and inside is the long-faced, guitar-playing man who you can barely see any features of. This dude creeps me the fuck out. From the little detail we can see of him, he reminds me of the Return the Slab guy from Courage the Cowardly Dog. King Ramses, I think his name is.
Return the slab.
What?
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
The man simply plays and doesn't acknowledge the player, who inspects the haystack in the middle of the barn and finds a minigame that is essentially Minesweeper for one of the items. After a few well-placed goat jump scares, the player solves the Minesweeper game and gets the sundial. Note that this barn was at least in the vicinity of where the office building was on the previous day. Same general direction, at least. I don't think this faceless guitar player is going to be important, but again, I do want to point out just how creepy he is and how much he adds to the atmosphere just being there. It feels ominous. I don't know why, I just don't like this guy. The player leaves the barn and heads out towards another structure in the distance. This ends up being assigned to the garden spire where Ann Hessen is, who we can assume is the painter from earlier, considering they share the same name.
Hey, you wouldn't happen to know Ann the Painter, would you?
Following a few garden trellises that are probably placed to lead the player to exactly where they're going, they eventually find these strange small tower-like buildings that look like lighthouses. The player looks them over and then follows along to the garden spire, where Ann lambasts them for disturbing her during her artistic endeavors.
Goodness, look at you intruding upon my personal space. Can't you see I'm in the middle of an illustration? No matter. I've been struggling to complete this piece for a long while.
Ann asks if the player was the assistant the shepherd sent her to help with this piece she can't finish. Then a very easy minigame is played by the player, where they must put green paint in the right spot. After doing so, Ann is over the moon. She is just chuffed.
That is just magnificent work. It looks just like one of the classics.
And rewards the player with one of her paintings, which she keeps in the bandstand with the blue roof for some reason. The inside of the bandstand is of course made of stone like the outside, and features 3 paintings, which are all of the field that the game takes place in, and also the feather that they need is in the middle of the room. There's also this creepy statue, but that might be nothing, it's probably nothing. The player takes the feather and the center painting, which seems to feature a lighthouse, before heading into the mysterious hatch to the left that I didn't mention until just now. That's a mysterious hatch. The hatch leads to what seems to be a stone sewer or some type of underground waterway. The ambience for this area is incredibly disturbing, featuring dripping water and, most unnervingly, a sort of croaky, droning noise that plays on repeat in the background. Almost sounds like a motorcycle running in the distance with some effects put over it. The player walks around in this waterway, eventually walking up to a tunnel into the dark for a while. They walk facing the darkness for a good few minutes and get to a far point when they suddenly hear a far-off distorted voice, pitched down and seemingly spouting off nonsense. It sounds like someone singing to themselves, which, considering the yodeling that sounded pretty similar to this at the start of the series, makes sense and could be connected to that. The player decides to leave, heading down the waterway back towards the hatch. Behind them, suddenly, there is a yelling sound that is played quite loudly. Though it doesn't seem like they're being followed, they hurry out. Things really only get spookier from there. The player obviously wants to get back to the Balloon Man to get what is more than likely the bowling ball, but night descends quite quickly. Off note, but the game or render or whatever this is looks pretty as it descends into night, a lot closer to what I'd say a PS1 game or an early 2000s PC game would look like in my memory versus the rest of the game. On the way to the balloon, the main menu theme begins to play, as if on a carnival or steam organ. The music sounds very pretty, but we know from the previous day that night descending isn't a good thing for the player or Saywell during his actual real-life adventure. Night fully falls, and with the tone of a bell, an ominous bell, the words, "The shepherd is coming," appears on the screen. In spite of this, the player continues towards the balloon, looking around for the shepherd. They don't see anything at first, but eventually begin to hear a rather disturbing, repeating musical pattern. Now, I, like many others, thought maybe the shepherd was the sign from the previous episode, but we were all wrong. That's apparently just one of the shepherd's hinch train signs. No, this thing, this tall, dark, and spooky outline is the shepherd. The sound it makes is, funny enough, similar to that of an oncoming train mixed with a lower-pitched train warning sign. The shepherd itself is a tall, rather large, dark figure that seems to be holding a shepherd's staff. And while we can't really see his or its face, we can see that he has disturbingly long arms and is possibly wearing a gas mask, though it is covered by what looks like the shade of a hat. I'll also go ahead and say that I believe the shepherd could be the overgrown man, considering his cloak seems to be a dark and leafy green. I like that it really does seem like the player is scared of the oncoming shepherd. The person begins shaking the mouse or analog stick or whatever around to move the camera as if panicking or trying to make themselves faster, which is something that, like, some people do. I even do it when playing horror games. You're just kind of, like, shaking your camera, being like, come on, come on. He's also constantly looking back over his shoulder to see how close the shepherd is getting, which, again, very realistic to how people play horror games. I can only imagine how terrifying it would have been to have been Clifton Saywell in this real situation if this giant, scary, train-sounding bastard was chasing his ass down. At least within the world of the game, the shepherd is a massive, intimidating presence. The player does happen to make it to the door, in which the Day 2 is marked as complete, despite the missing item. So Episode 2 or Day 2 adds more to our mystery here. The level changed, as levels in games tend to do, but is essentially the same world, meaning each trip will be a different version of this same world or level or overworld, which we can of course assume is the meadow. We saw that there can be both relatively normal-looking humans and whatever these guys are. Are they just NPCs, or is them looking messed up something deeper? Did Clifton Saywell actually meet a balloon man with a long face and an awesome outfit who called air balloons
Fire balloons.
or was that put in the game just to give the player a reason to go where they needed to go? On the topic of the balloon man and the barn man disturbed me more simply because of how quiet he was and his face just looking less defined and creepier to me. Like, it just leaves more to the imagination, which is always scarier. Then there's the topic of the underground passage that was underneath the bandstand that led to that creepy waterway. While it didn't seem to lead anywhere, at least right now, the noises that he heard in it could be somewhat important later. It could have also been connected to the well that we saw earlier, like I pointed out. And it could also have some type of symbolism about things not being normal under the surface. I mean, none of this is normal. Speaking of not normal, the shepherd, of course, is very important as well. We can tell from what we've seen that he is the ruler of sorts over the meadow, or whatever this place is.
Shepard's not mad, is he?
He has train-signed minions that grab people who go against his rules.
It's important to respect.
He also seemingly moves people around on computers and assigns people to help others.
I was just trying to look at the computers to see where my favorite people were moved to.
Could it be that you're the assistant the shepherd promised me?
He's also a gigantic, terrifying green monster that chases people who stay out after curfew. His intimidating aura is reinforced by that which precedes him, both the tone and text of the shepherd arriving and the tune that plays as he approaches the player. It's interesting that the characters in the game seem to look up to the shepherd in a way, despite the fact that he seems to be a relatively intimidating figure to the player and by extension Clifton Saywell and the guy that gets carried away by the train stop sign. More hinting at the shepherd's monstrous nature comes from a post made by Kane Pixels on his music channel. Seemingly a joke song, Shepherd Boss Fight.wave (real) is a banger even if it is a joke song. But in the background, there's a translucent image of what is possibly the shepherd. It's kind of hard to make out at first, but someone on Reddit did make it easier to see, and it's pretty damn terrifying. Also, I mentioned this earlier, but this scary image that's in this that I said could be the shepherd is a stretched out, scarified version of a laughing head, which plays into the theory that this could all be something about death since he was looking at a laughing head when he died, or that the shepherd itself is somehow a laughing head. You get what I'm saying. It's like connected in some way. And remember me talking about people with long faces? Look at his long face. See, I'm making sense. Everything's adding up. Also, circling back to something from much earlier, what do you think those mirrors or solar panels are all about? I think it's possible that the player will replay the second day in a future video since he didn't get every item, but of course, that might not be the case. It does look like there might be more to this second day. Anyway, that's enough for day 2. Time to talk about the final piece of content in People Still Live Here so far. Sunshine. Another short interlude style of video between the days. This features someone looking around in what seems to be the fields or meadow, whatever this place is called. In the distance, they see a hill with a bunker set into the side of it, as well as a utility pole, strangely enough. Then, what's that? They hear a train in the distance. There's a lot of stuff about trains in this series, haven't you noticed? But that's not all. You see, within the description of the video, there is context added to this particular part of the series, which gives us more of an understanding of where the story might be going. It reads as thus.
Video taken sometime between April 2023 and September 2024. Context. Previously unimpacted individuals granted natural passage to Meadow Outland Steps. Uncertain locality. Via derelict structure in Northern California, USA. Additional footage was found along with this 18-second clip and is currently being reviewed for potential release.
This adds even more questions and intrigue to our story so far. Who is this talking, and what group do they work for? What does the previously unimpacted part of this all mean? Someone who hadn't been to the Meadow Outland Steps before and going there impacts them in some way? We also have a full name for the place now, at least from the point of view of whatever group is saying this. Whether this group be government or corporation or secret underground society, we don't know. This group says that the person who filmed the video managed to get into the site from a derelict structure in Northern California. It's possible that the derelict structure is in fact the bunker that we can see in the distance. Also, another fun note is I'm pretty sure Kane Pixels is from California, and a lot of his videos actually take place in California. I am pretty sure that the oldest view also takes place in California. The fact that the individual was able to access the Meadow Steps through a derelict structure actually does line up with how Clifton Saywell seems to have accessed the Meadow, at least within the video game, as he also found a structure of sorts, though the one that he found was in a swamp and looked more akin to a little wooden temple or something like that. I mean, it could also be like I said earlier, which is that some of what we saw in the game was more artistic expression on the part of the fictional developers who made it. What if that long metal hallway that Clifton Saywell took to get here and the mini tower was actually a bunker in the real world, and was just made to look like a little temple and a little castle tower to look more video gamey? Who knows? It is interesting though. Back to the idea of the individual being unimpacted, while I don't think this is some kind of virus, it could mean that some people are unwillingly brought to the Meadow. That could be what they mean by impacted. It could also mean that, like I said earlier, this is a digital world, and being impacted or unimpacted is when someone is digitized when they're brought into this world, or whatever that might be. You know, the difference between people being in the computer and people visiting, but they're not actually digitized and part of the world, if that makes sense. Having said all that, that's all we have so far. There hasn't been a new episode since this last one. So now, we've got to look back at everything that we have seen so far and see if we can piece together an idea of what this series means, where it is, and where it's going. With my luck, this video will come out right as a new episode or video comes out, but who knows? I mean, from the FAQ on Kane Pixels Discord, he's actually working on the Backrooms movie right now, so it might be a while and I might be in luck. Anyway, onwards to piecing together People Still Live Here. People Still Live Here is a perplexing series with a lot going on subtextually. That sentence could be used to describe almost any of Kane's creative works, but the others have at least progressed to a point where we understand some of the grander designs behind them. A lot of what I'm going to say about People Still Live Here is just conjecture, of course, because most of what we have is questions with very few answers. People Still Live Here is at least part about death, possibly the afterlife, and things of that matter. While the player is alive, the person the game is based on, Clifton J. Saywell, is dead. We see what looks to be him dying in the very first part of this series, with a laughing head or something that looks similar to one standing over him. While the person playing the character could be seen as a protagonist or even a deuteragonist, Clifton J. Saywell is in a sense our real protagonist, as he actually went through the events we are seeing within the game. The idea that we are getting two stories at once is also interesting. There is the story of Clifton J. Saywell, the man who went through the events that the game is depicting and who died at the beginning of the series. The part of the story that the game depicts happened in the 1930s and the 1940s, and then his death happened in the 90s. And then there is the possibly modern part of the story, which is when the game is being recorded by the player and the events of things like Graveyard and Sunshine, which we don't really know when those take place, but I'm just going to call those the modern part of the story. So we have a multitude of characters in this story, despite the fact that we don't actually have many people talking. We have the person playing the game. We have Clifton J. Saywell. We have the Shepherd. We have the group that talks about the videos Sunrise and Graveyard in the comments of the video Sunrise. Hey, this is Editing Ghosts here. I'm going to say Sunrise instead of Sunshine a lot, and I obviously mean Sunshine. I wrote these last segments a lot longer after the first half of the video because I've been working on this video for months. That's my fault. Anyway, Sunshine, not Sunrise. But we don't really know the motivations of all these different people, or what's really going on and what they're experiencing. That thing that they're experiencing is the meadow, and I saw people in the YouTube comments saying it could be a place you go after you die, but I feel it's more complicated than that. As I mentioned earlier when talking about the second part of the series, the first part that is gameplay, we get hints that this world could be within a computer, or at least that people's consciousnesses are being stored within a computer.
I was just trying to look at the computers to see where my favorite people were moved to.
I don't want people to think I'm spying on their thoughts. I wouldn't do that.
Now, this is very interesting, because if people can be stored within these computers, and you can visit them like the guy says, we also know that living people can physically travel to the meadow through paths that seem to appear, or at least that's what it seems to be. We have Clifton J. Saywell doing that during the events of the game, and we also have the unnamed person in Sunrise doing it through an apparently abandoned building in California. You could call these paths that they travel portals because they allow them to travel to a different space that isn't necessarily within our own world, or at least it seems otherworldly based on the events of the game. It very well might be in our world, we'll see. These paths, or portals, are interesting and seem varied based on what we know. It's possible that they can pop up and disappear, because if people could travel there consistently, this group from the Sunrise video description might have already gone there. There are two of these paths or portals that we know of so far. The one that Clifton J. Saywell encountered that seemed to look like a temple and was in his local swamp, and then the one that the unnamed person in Sunrise found in an abandoned building in California. The one that Clifton encountered is notable because of the security camera inside, as well as the swirl above it and the futuristic looking metal hallway that he traveled to get to the meadow. The swirl that's in the temple, as I said at the start, could have some type of symbolism attached to it. The cycle of life and death, the idea of heading deeper into something or spiraling into something. Alan Wake 2 uses this symbolism specifically, the idea of a spiral, something that you go deeper into, something that can seem the same but changes, which the meadow does for Clifton Saywell in the game. I also wanted to note really quick the hexagonal or honeycomb pattern above the entryway to the long hallway. This could also be symbolic of something, as honeycomb or hexagonal patterns like this are used in different spiritual beliefs and also mean other things in our world. They're part of the natural order with things like bees' honeycombs, so I just thought that was something I would add to. Speaking of portals, I thought I'd momentarily talk about liminal spaces in regards to Kane Pixel's work. When people say liminal, many think of the photos of liminal spaces that they see online, usually spooky and off-putting photos of strange but well-known areas that we've often seen but have something a little off to them. Really, a liminal space in its purest definition is a transitionary space. A liminal space in your own home, for example, would be a hallway. A hallway is a transitionary space that you probably spend a lot of time in but don't think about too often, as it's a room that you use to get to the more important rooms of your house. You use the hallway to get to the living room or the kitchen or your own bedroom. So at its core, a liminal space is a place of transition. Often liminal spaces depicted in media don't fit this perfectly, but they sometimes do. It's not one-to-one. As far as Kane Pixel's work, he likes to use the liminal spaces idea in both the truest use of the term, as well as the more online concept of creepy spaces. Kane likes to use liminal spaces as a depiction of a transition between the real world and the horror world that he creates within his works. This goes back to the idea of portals that I brought up just a little bit ago. In The Oldest View, for example, the liminal space that transitions Wyatt from our world to the ghostly world of the mall is an extremely long and spooky staircase. The mall itself within The Oldest View is a transitionary space. A mall is really just a large place that gets you to the stores within the mall. They are both liminal in the sense that they are creepy and familiar places, but also these two things are truly transitional. If you want to hear me talk more about the symbolism and meaning in The Oldest View, I do have videos covering that, which I will link down below. The long hallway in People Still Live Here is similar. It is a liminal space in both senses of the word. It is creepy and off-putting because it doesn't match up with our view of reality, and it is also a place that someone uses to travel from one world to another. It takes Clifton J. Saywell and the player in the game From Hickamock Swamp within our real world to the strange other world of the meadow. Speaking of things that are transitionary, the swirl that marks the path leading into the meadow, as I said at the start, could have symbolism that fits all of this. Not only could it represent the cycle of life and death, which this series seems to touch on, it could also be hinting at the idea of heading deeper within to something, as a spiral is a pattern that goes into itself. The meadow is also liminal, both in the online sense of the word and the true definition of the word. It is a place that the player and Clifton Saywell use to travel or transition from place to place, but it's also just generally kind of creepy and weird. If we want to touch back on the life and death symbolism, it could be the place that you transition to after you die, but again, that is just me speculating. Continuing to talk about the meadow, the shepherd seems to be the ruler of the place. While it seems he can be helpful or even generous if you go off of the people within the meadow,
Could it be that you're the assistant the shepherd promised me? I was beginning to think he had forgotten.
he also lets his sign creatures drag people within the meadow away,
Important to respect.
and it seems that if one does not follow his or their rules, there will be punishments. We also know that the world of the meadow can change rather quickly based on the days the player or Clifton entered. Why it changes, we don't know. My theory is that each time someone enters the meadow, they're possibly entering a different instance of the same world that are kind of stacked on top of each other. The best way I can make reference to this is imagine a save file for a game, specifically like The Sims. Each save file uses the same town, but each version of it has a different house or characters that you've made or dropped in. So at its core, it is The Sims, but there are a bunch of different variations of that world within the same game. So the meadow would have the same core identity, but there would be different things that changed each time. There's always going to be the green fields and possibly the windmill. But, you know, in one save file, there's the little house over in the fields, and it's really windy. And in another, there's the air balloon guy and the painter. I think you get the idea that I'm making. We know there are people within the meadow, and them being there and what they say seems to imply Clifton did actually meet real physical people in this world. The man with the glasses and Anne specifically are the ones I'm talking about, the one who seemed the most regular and human. It could be that Clifton also met the balloon man and the guitar man playing as well, though their designs make me think that they are NPCs or that something is very wrong with them. It could be that he actually did meet these two people and they are just disfigured for some reason. Both have strangely long faces and are kind of disturbing to look at, but as we've seen, the shepherd may have an extremely strange and scary face as well. It could be that, if this world really is computerized data as I've theorized, that the data for these people was corrupted or changed to some degree. Again, that's just a theory. A game theory. No, I'm just playing. Don't sue me, MatPat, please. We've seen two examples of creepy stone underground areas within this video. One that led into the office building in the second episode, and one underneath the bandstand in the latest one that was released. These areas seem slightly out of sorts compared to the rest of the game, and I wonder what their importance is. The waterway encountered in Day 2 was especially interesting, as the sounds and whatnot are disturbing, but make no sense, at least from what we know so far. Who was down in the sewer doing those scary groans? And what was up with that underground river? I mean, I know it's a sewer and they usually have running water in them, but really, what's the purpose? What was with the man's shoes found by the well, and why was that well for display only? If I want to wax on symbolism here a little bit, the underground areas could be showing the idea of a dark underbelly of the meadow, which is stereotypically beautiful most of the time. We know that Saywell is dead in the modern era. We know that he was a living computer from his obituary, which is interesting wording considering everything I've theorized. We know this guy talked about people being in computers and being moved around, and also being able to see their thoughts because of that.
I don't want people to think I'm spying on their thoughts.
We know the shepherd is considered by these people to be a leader of sorts, who they don't seem scared of, well, until they do. And we know that the shepherd is, in fact, scary. He looks kind of like a distorted version of the Laughing Head, if the picture from shepherdbossfight.wave, parentheses real parentheses, is to be believed. We know that someone else has gotten into the meadow by traveling through an abandoned location, and that it was filmed. Hell, the graveyard video, if it takes place in the present, could be that very same person. The graveyard could imply something happened between Clifton's visit and now that led to the signs dying in a way, though of course one did activate while the guy was there, or at least partially. If you ask me, the meadow is an alternate computerized or digitalized world in some way, but real people can seem to get there, kind of like Code Lyoko, I guess, which is a cartoon that we watched as kids. It could even be that some people's consciousnesses go there when they die, or they're put there by someone. It's really interesting to know that Clifton visited this place during what was the 1930s and 40s, when the technology here is so obviously modern or even futuristic. Everything does have a sort of Windows XP aesthetic and the graphical stylings of a game from then, so it could even be that this world was created around the time of the late 90s, early 2000s, and there's also a time travel element to all of this. Or this all just has that aesthetic for nostalgia reasons, which I'm fine with too. If I were to take a real shot in the dark, and I mean this is reaching hard, the meadow is a sort of digitized alternate dimension that was created by someone in our real world. It was made to keep people alive, or at least their consciousness is alive, or something along those lines. It could turn people into code in a sense, but they were still physically there, so to speak, or at least some of them were, which is why Clifton Saywell could come back to our real world, traveling back and forth between this place known as the meadow. Them being digitized is also why they can be moved around within these computers, or whatever this is.
Just trying to look at the computers to see where my favorite people were moved to. It's been a long time since I've read computer works, though.
The Shepherd is possibly the creator of this world, or even a program meant to look over it. If it has a human creator, they might have gone a bit mad with power, and that is why they seem so intimidating. This would make the Morse code at the start make a little sense, as the Shepherd and those who live there could be one with the land, as they are all made of the same stuff, which is code. The land is made of code, the people are made of code, it's all the same thing, but shaped in different ways to make this world and the people within it. Easily transferable and changeable. The Shepherd himself could even be the land, so to speak, as in it's all a simulation being run by him or within him, mattering on how deep you want to get into the idea of like things being computerized and the idea of simulations and things like that. If we even want to get crazy with that time travel idea I put forth earlier, it could be that Clifton Saywell created this very world and created a sort of paradoxical loop of sorts, where he goes to this world that he would create in the future, thus becoming inspired and learning how to create it. And him dying in 1990 is him being haunted by his own creation. This would make the fact that in his obituary he's called a living computer even more ironic, because going back to that idea of this world being simulated and all made of the same stuff, it could be a world created within himself in his digitized format, his soul in essence in this computer creating this world around him that holds other people within it as well. Kind of like the idea that God is everything. Well, imagine Clifton Saywell creating this other world where he is everything, he is also within it, and he houses it, if that makes sense. We at least know that some type of time dilation is an aspect of the story, considering he met the overgrown man when he was a child, then went to the meadow when he was in his 20s and 30s. We know this because his obituary says he was born in 1914 and he didn't go to the meadow until 1934, when the game says the events took place. And the technology from the future is in the meadow when he went into it in the 1930s and 1940s, which means there's just a lot of stuff where there's modern technology in the past, and him encountering figures that have to do with this thing that would happen in the future. I said this was all a shot in the dark and sounded kind of crazy, because there are still a lot of questions within the series, and I'm just kind of throwing out ideas and thoughts that I've had while watching it. Questions that we've been left with are, when was this place created? How old is it really? Is time there relative to our own world? What did the Morse code at the start really mean? Who is the Shepherd? Who are the people within this world? What does Clifton Saywell have to do with it? Who is the overgrown man? Is it the Shepherd? Is it Clifton Saywell himself visiting himself in the past to put forth the events that would create this series? Also, there's a lot of references to trains in the series. So I'm interested to see what that's all about, what trains have to do with everything here. This last bit here, I've written a bit after the rest of the script. This script has changed a lot. I started on it like 2 months ago, and I've been so busy with work. But since I've been making videos, this would probably be the longest I've gone without making one on this channel. And that has given me a lot of time to think about this series away from it, just thinking about what is going on within it, and that of course got me thinking on a more subtextual and philosophical level about the series. Now, there's obvious interpretations of moving on, the idea of the afterlife, the idea of transition and things like that, but Kane Pixels likes to be both literal and metaphorical within his works. If we go back to the code at the beginning, the Morse code I mean, that plays at the end of Saywell, what that little line, poem or verse, or whatever you want to call it, is getting at is that things you do in life leave an echo behind of what you were. The work that you put out into the world affects the world even after you're gone. The title, People Still Live Here, can mean literally that people still live in whatever world is left when you leave it, in this case, the meadow. But it can also mean that people still exist within things created in the past. The fact that the story is being told within a game that is made in 2005 and has those aesthetics and is meant to call back to a different time could also be used as, like, people still live in these types of environments. You think of people playing old games. People are still living within those worlds. People are still experiencing these things that were created and exist long after some of the people who made them are gone. And yes, they don't physically exist within them, like the character Clifton Saywell going to the meadow, but that is part of their lives, and thus that is part of their living existence. They get to, in a sense, exist within these universes or experience them, and that changes their life. If you think about it from a video game perspective, you know there are still people playing old MMOs that were created in the 90s. Ultima Online, EverQuest, Anarchy Online, RuneScape. I mean, WoW itself basically was created over 20 years ago. There are people who probably worked on these games who don't exist here anymore, but their work still does, and their worlds still affect people. So if you interpret it in that way, or it could literally just be the idea that people still live in the world after you're gone, and when you move on, those things that you did continue to affect those people. Your actions carry on after you, even small things. I feel like that's a pretty important message, especially given today's political climate, dealing with things like climate change in the world and the economy, and it seeming like people are becoming meaner and meaner every day. And this world that we're in and the things we do in it are going to be left for people who will exist after us. Maybe that's what this series is about. Maybe it's Kane meditating on his own effects he's having on the world with the things he's creating. The legacy that he's leaving behind. Not in a selfish way, but in a more altruistic way. Looking at legacy more as an understanding that what you do in life has effects on people besides you and after you, for better or worse. Or maybe I'm making a huge reach. But yeah, that's all I have for People Still Live Here, really. It was a fun watch and fun to talk about. I hope you liked this. It's a bit different. I get rambly at times, but if you did enjoy it, go check out my other videos covering Kane Pixels' works. Some of them are more linear and video essay-y, which I tried to do with this one, but this one took so long to make that I'm just going to try to get it out here. I did a big video on Kane Pixels' Backrooms series that didn't do too well, so I always try to push people to that. And then the oldest view videos that I did, those were really popular for a little bit. I've also got smaller individual stuff on other things on my channel that I'd love it if you'd check out. I'm thinking of doing a video on the recent Backrooms videos that Kane Pixel did that have been posted by him, because there's going to be a good bit of time between People Still Live Here and future YouTube Backroom stuff as he's working on the Backrooms movie, from what I understand. But I also want to mix up my coverage of things on this channel. My audience is currently split from like horror, YouTube stuff, and gaming stuff, and I like both, but I want to cover those and more as well. You know, I started getting into comic books recently, and a new Resident Evil game is coming out. I kind of want to talk about that. And if you wonder why it took so long for this video to come out, it's because I've been in a bit of a slump lately. I started a new job back in December and have been working quite a bit, and my schedule was pretty off and still is, but I think I'm finally kind of getting into the groove of it, maybe. I want to be making videos again, and I want to work hard on them. I want to do other stuff besides horror and games, though those will always have a place in my heart, and I will still make videos on them. Like I said, I've gotten into comics lately, and would love to make videos on things like how bad the first, 30 issues of X-Men was when it came out by Stan Lee in the 60s. Or even just do a video on games that I've been playing and things lately. Those are just thoughts, though. But before that, a big thank you to my patrons on Patreon and my members on YouTube. It's been so long since I've posted a video, and yet I still have people willing to give me money because they believe in me, and that means a lot. We've got Squiddy LaFemme, we've got Cade Kirk, we've got Southbridge over on Patreon. These guys have been donating, even though I haven't released a video in 8 months. And we've got Ren, we've got Alexander DeLarge, and we've got Ash Bob. It's amazing that these people have been members on my YouTube channel and members of my Patreon, despite it being so long since I released a video. Some people have literally been members for 14 months straight. It means a lot that you guys still believed in me, even though I lapsed in making content. I'm hoping to get more consistent soon. And one last thing. For those who've stayed here till the very end, I want to warn you that this is going to get real and political. It does kind of connect to the rest of the video, but I am going to express some of my political opinions here. So if you don't want to hear it, if you don't want to dislike me for the things I'm going to say, then click off here. But if you want to hear it, if you're open-minded, then stick around. Because we are in hard times right now. Especially if you're an American, but really all over the world. In America, we're dealing with a political regime that doesn't care about us, or is purposely endangering and uprooting the lives of many around us. Government workers are being fired monthly. Different immigrants, from the poorest of them to those in higher education, are being abducted, and at worst being thrown into planes and taken to foreign torture prisons that are incredibly dangerous to be in with no information given on where they were dropped. Or they're kicking people out of the military because who they are, despite their qualifications, taking their benefits away all because they're different, or trying to take away people's health care of all ages, and saying that they don't deserve it and that only the lazy ones are going to get kicked off, which is just insane. This administration is even trying to bully schools into doing things their way, lawmakers and politicians as well, all the while rewarding corruption, freeing people who have been proven to have done things that are illegal and stole money from people. I just wanted to say all this to show that there are plenty of people out there who hate this. You're going to see YouTube comments. They're going to be supportive blindly. You don't know if those are bots. You don't know if those are real people. Well, I'm a real person. I'm a real person who wants to fight this. And there are many other people who do and want to make things right in the world. You aren't alone. What is happening is wrong. It's evil, and you've got to call it what it is. There will be people who will stay just to hear this, to disagree, to say that what is happening is righteous or whatever, that I shouldn't talk about politics, especially on a video about something like this, that I should just stick to talking about horror and games, that I don't know any better. That there are different people affected deserve it because they shouldn't have been here, or they should have been fired, or they deserve to have their livelihoods or benefits taken away. Or their property taken away from them without recourse, or just parroting whatever they're told because they don't want to do any internal soul searching. They just want the worst part of themselves validated so they can give in to the easiest emotions to give into, which are the most negative ones. Or maybe they just like seeing other people hurt because they're hurt. To these people, I have to say, what if it was you? What if it was your family, your best friend, your neighbor? Do you really not care about other people's lives? Or are you just going to come up with another excuse for why they deserved it, actually, but you don't? And the crazy thing is, I wrote this script like a month ago, and I've even added to it, but things are changing so fast every day. Some things fail, others succeed. None of them are good, in my opinion. They're going to get more people hurt than they help. Specifically in the name of hate and ignorance, but also in the name of helping the richest and most powerful people in the world become more rich and more powerful. A lot of the fact that so many things are happening every day is called flooding the zone. It's something that right-wing people like to do. It's basically where you do so much that it's hard to stop everything that's happening. You know, in history, a specific German army called this tactic a blitzkrieg, but we're talking about it more specifically on the political stage rather than the stage of war. And just to add to this, I am recording this now like in August. This segment I recorded like months ago. So much more has happened. DC just got taken control of by the White House, and there's been so many raids and different horrific political things, and of course, the Epstein files, release them, stop trying to distract from them, and there's also Palestine and Gaza, and the situation with Israel. It's just a lot, and it's a lot of stuff that needs to be talked about, needs to be thought about. There's plenty of people who've talked about the Israel-Palestine situation. There's some really good videos out there. The one I recommend the most, the one that had the biggest impact on me, is by a guy called Sean. I will link it down below. The series that I covered here today, People Still Live Here, if it really is possibly about legacy, like I theorized, is this the legacy that we want to leave for America, for the rest of the world? We have effects after we're gone. I don't want this to be the legacy that's left behind. I want the world to be better than I left it, for everyone. I'll leave you with this poem. It's famous. You've probably heard of it before, especially recently. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and many of you who do know it probably have been. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for Jewish people, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jewish person. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Martin Niemöller.